Let's talk about While Idaho Slept, the new book released this week about the Idaho 4 murders. I'm going to play a couple of snippets from some of the earlier chapters. And if the information in these snippets is accurate, then it fills in some blanks and answers some questions that have arisen since we first got the PCA. It's important to note that nothing in this book has been verified or confirmed by anybody involved with the investigation. We know that the author is from Boise, Idaho. We know that he had access to investigative reports, and we know that he spoke to Dylan Mortenson's father. And that's important because in the earlier chapters, specifically in the chapters that focus on the night of the murder, we're hearing from Dylan's POV. We're hearing what she sees and what she thinks. And I think it's very possible that the author got that information from Dylan's father, who got it from Dylan herself. Please remember, Dylan's father is not bound by the gag order. Before I play this, I want to issue a very big trigger warning. This clip is very graphic.
Stabbed multiple times in various areas of their bodies, including fatally in the upper torso. There was a lot of blood, the Latah County coroner, Kathy Mabbitt, had told the regional CBS news station. It was a very sad scene. She was downplaying the horror in those bedrooms, and would later privately discuss the crimes in far more graphic detail with family members of the victims. The killer had torn the victim's flesh with a massive knife, she'd said, the way a deer hunter might tear into his prey when dressing it out. Also later, investigators would reveal that the victims likely hadn't been asleep after all. One of the victims had also reportedly suffered what's known as overkill, when a murderer doesn't stop at death, but just keeps stabbing.
Let's talk about that overkill. After the murders, we heard from Kaylee's dad that Kaylee's wounds were significantly more brutal. That was the quote used in all of the media segments and interviews. Now, we don't know what that means, and we don't know if it means that Kaylee's wounds were more brutal in all of the victims or just Maddie. On the 48 Hours documentary a couple of weeks ago, Kaylee's dad was interviewed, and he said that Kaylee woke up in the middle of the attack and that she struggled to get out of that situation and that she fought back. So that could explain why her wounds were significantly more brutal, because she was fighting back, because she was alert, because she was awake. And that would have frustrated the murderer. This leads me to believe that Maddie was likely asleep or unconscious or just not aware of what was going on until it was far too late. I couldn't find any reporting that stated any one of the victims suffered more wounds than the other. But overkill, that's what overkill is. And that says two things to me. It says intense rage and says personal. This is why I dismiss all the talk about how this was drug related. The relationship between someone who sells drugs and someone who buys drugs, that's business. That's a money transaction. To commit the kind of act that this killer committed takes such an intense amount of rage. And it's not the kind of rage I see being exhibited by somebody who didn't get paid for their drugs. And remember what I said the other day. For it to be personal doesn't mean that there has to be a personal connection between the killer and the victim. It's just personal to him. His motivation is personal to him.
On the 13th, Dylan told investigators afterward, she had been sleeping but was awoken just before 2 a.m. by her housemates and Ethan, who had returned to the residence but had not gone straight to bed. Based on investigative reports, she had apparently dozed, fell back into a deep sleep, and was again awoken by a commotion in the house, this time shortly after 4 a.m. Dylan could hear what sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog, the golden doodle she shared with Jack DeCour, upstairs on the 3rd floor, just above her. She could hear Murphy barking and could hear movement across the floor.
Now, like I said the other day, up to this point, they had never defined what Dylan meant by she heard what she thought was Kaylee playing with the dog. And so now we know that it was, or at least we're led to believe, that it was movement across the floor and the dog barking. What they also reveal in this clip is that Dylan was asleep when they all got home and they woke her up around 2 o'clock. So she was in bed. She was asleep. And then they say, and this is very important, they say shortly after 4 a.m. is when she thought she heard Kaylee playing with her dog. Now, in the PCA, here it says approximately 4 a.m. is when she heard what she thought was Kaylee playing with her dog. They never specified, was because approximately could be before, it could be after, it could be exactly the time. So now at least we have some clarification, if this is accurate, that she heard this sometime after 4 a.m. Now that lines up with the PCA. See, a lot of people have been saying, well, if she heard Kaylee playing with her dog at approximately 4, and he was parking his car or entering the area at 4:04, then whatever she heard going on upstairs couldn't have been Koberger. Well, with this information, it's very possible it was Koberger because approximately 4 or shortly after 4 could be 4:10, maybe 4:08, 4:05, and they could probably confirm that by the data downloaded from the phone, because I could see Dylan, frustrated that she'd already been woken up, sending a text upstairs to Kaylee saying, "Hey, can you quiet down? I'm trying to sleep." And so now they have an idea of when she heard that noise.
The sounds were too loud to try to sleep through. From her bedroom, Dylan yelled out to her housemates, asking them to calm down. She was trying to sleep, she shouted up to them, but they didn't answer. She thought she heard Kaylee say, "There's someone here." Or maybe it was Xana saying the words. Dylan wasn't sure. Sometimes voices were heard through the vents, the walls, the flooring. Their direction of origin could be obfuscated in the old house. Dylan got up from her bed. She opened her bedroom door and looked toward the nearby stairwell that led to the third floor, where she saw nothing. In the dark there were only shadows. Around the hall from her, to the left, was the shared kitchen, and down a hallway to the right was Xana's bedroom, where Ethan had been staying over a lot. Nothing looked out of the ordinary in that direction either. She closed her bedroom door and started to return to bed. But then she heard more commotion. Somebody in Xana's bedroom was crying, but she wasn't sure who. All she knew was that she heard what sounded like tears. She again opened her bedroom door and peeked out. While she saw nothing remarkable, she heard a male voice say what she thought was, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." It sounded like it came from Xana's room. Maybe Xana had been crying, and Ethan was going to help with whatever was wrong, Dylan thought. She was exhausted from all the noise keeping her awake. But soon she heard more crying, and for a third time she opened her bedroom door. This time, she saw a man dressed in all black clothing with a black mask covering his mouth and nose. He was walking toward Dylan in the dark, an athletic-looking person but not muscular, 5'10" or taller, and with bushy eyebrows. Had he been partying with her roommates? Was he one of the many new friends they'd made during the first months of school? She didn't know.
Okay. I said in an earlier video that I felt as though when Dylan said she thought she heard Kaylee playing with her dog, she identified the origin of the sound, the person making the sound. And she said it was Kaylee. But when she said she heard the crying, she said she heard crying coming from Kernodle's bedroom. And here, again, if this is accurate, that confirms that she didn't know if it was Xana that was supposedly crying. And again, she says that it sounded like tears. And she didn't know if it was Xana, but when she heard it again and she heard the crying, she said, "Oh," said to herself, "Oh, Ethan's going to help her. Ethan's going to help her feel better or something. Ethan's going to help her." And so I could see her thinking, okay, she's got someone there. I'm going back to bed. And maybe they're having a fight. I don't know. Whatever it is, she has somebody there with her. So it's sounding to me like Dylan really wasn't aware of what what was going on with these noises, that it had already been loud at 2 o'clock in the morning when everybody got home, and that maybe this was kind of typical for them. So noise didn't really trigger anything. And it doesn't sound like she heard screaming or yelling. She just heard shuffling of feet. So when people say there had to have been noise, she must have heard something. She did hear something. It's just sounding like she misinterpreted the noise. Now, like I've said, none of this is confirmed, but I have reached out to the author, and he responded back, and and I asked him if he could confirm some of the points that I'm bringing up here. And he said that he was finishing up with some interviews and that he would get back to me Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. Now, if he does, and I can get some answers, I'll create another video. If is there anything else you want me to ask him? If you want to get the book, it's on Amazon. While Idaho Slept. No, I'm not a sponsor of any kind. I'm not getting paid for this. I just thought that this would be something of interest that you guys would want. If you have any other questions, anything else you want to talk about, leave it in the comments or send me an email at characteranalysissubstack@gmail.com. And I'll see you guys later.